Martell Visitor Center.
Tour start and finish. And this is actually part of, it used to be our old bottling plant, this whole building. And we delocalized the bottling plant in 2005 because it was because Martell was doing very well under Pernod Ricard. We needed to make more production space. And the problem here was all the lines, there was S-turns everywhere. And so that inhibited a good cadence of the lines. It slowed them down. So now we've got a purpose-built building, and every bottling line is a straight line. And the fastest line it has a capacity of 15,000 bottles in 1 hour. Wow. Which is quite an achievement. So we didn't know what to do with this building. And in France, if you want to knock a building down or change the outside of it, you have to have the authorization of the French Architect's Office, because this building is less than 500 meters from the French monument. So we made an arrangement with the town and the Architect's Office that we would refurbish the building, restore it to its original state. It was built in 1928. And so this part is a visitor centre. Across the corridor is going to be the future Fondation Martell, the Martell Foundation Museum. First and second floor is going to be a laboratory, in theory, and then a restaurant with a terrace. And then the best news is on the rooftop there's going to be a summer bar, which is opening in July, so you have to come back.
Wow.
Definitely.
They're asking about coming back.
So this slurry was restored by the Martell workshops. It still works, it smokes a little bit, but it is drivable.
He said when you look back at this, it's designed to look like Cognac, according to the model. The wood, and that is actually the barrel.
Oh, really?
That's actually a fine-grain wood barrel.
The property was bought by the Martell family in 1833, and the house was purchased on Martell in 1750. The reason the family purchased this land is because where we are now covers 100 acres. It's because it goes from the old entrance, the old part of Cognac, right the way down the river. So the first thing they did was to build warehousing all the way around here, stock the barrels in. And the offices were put up in 1860, 1870. So this is the Martell headquarters. And in 1995 we decided to restore this house, and there's a certain part of our archives.
Smell that wood.
So this is how we imagine Jean Martel's reception area might have looked like. He never actually lived in the house, but he did use it to work out of. So all the furniture in here, given that Jean Martel was English and never took French nationality, all the furniture here is British, from London. And all original from the time of Jean Martel, around 1750, including the original GPS of Jean Martel, still working strong. Because he used to go around on horseback, and the way they were given directions, it was like for 500 paces north, then turn northeast, and so he needed a compass. The floor, we even dug this up from an old farmhouse, again from Jean Martel's time, so everything is from that period. And the next room we have is a workshop. This is probably what his workshop would have looked like. A few barrels, you keep his horse gear in here, a few old tools, and a rather nice 1956 Grand Champagne. Nice and fruity. So, beautiful.
Wow. These are just displays, they'll stay up.
Yeah.
Or we'll never use them liquid in them.
Yeah, we will at some point. Yeah. Oh, every 2 or 3 years, someone comes in, uses the barrel on the end. They take down the top layers of barrels and they fill them up again. But the problem here is they have to roll them up a slope to get them to sit on the other barrels. This is a very old way of stacking barrels. Nowadays, of course, when we build a warehouse, we put racking systems in.
Archives.
This is a small selection of a few books from our archive selection. This one is letters and correspondence from 1781. The oldest book we have is this one, and it is a copy, that's why I can actually touch it. 1720. We're slowly digitalizing all our archives, but some of the old letters on parchment, the parchment is almost transparent, so it's very difficult to scan it. And of course the ink is starting to fade away. But if you put all our archive shelves in one long line, that line would stretch about 5 kilometers. And the city of Cognac, they only have about 3 kilometers of archives because they lost a lot of their records during the French Revolution, when the revolutionaries burnt a lot of the historical side. It happened all over France. But luckily the Martell family were able to preserve their archives. And it's quite funny when you go through the same handwriting. There was the scribe who copied the letters into the books, and then suddenly it would change because the guy's retired or got dead, whatever. So everything, this is again just a small selection of the old letters, and everything here is classified by year and then by alphabetical order.
What's some of the stuff that there are information is
This stops in 1995, and it only features members of the Martell family who actually worked in the company. So, Jean Martell had 9 kids. First wife died very young, but second wife was a baby machine, I guess. And so the 2 branches which go up are the 2 eldest sons who ran the firm after their mother died. So Jean Martell, born 1694 in Jersey, arrived here 1715, died in 1753, and his wife Rachel took over the company, and when she passed away in 1775, that's when the 2 sons, John Jr. and Frederick, took over the company. And as you can see, they're pretty prolific. At one point in the 19th century, the Martell family only had 2 daughters. So the 2 daughters married 2 brothers called Ferrino, but the wedding agreement was that the Ferrino family would adopt the name Martell. So that's why the family today is called Ferrino Martell. This is just a photographed book of some of the the family members. That dates from around 1860, 1870. This is a selection of the old letters. You can see how the problem about digitalizing that, it's almost impossible because it's so thin. But we've got a copy of the first time we received an order from the States was 1783. And that was shipped direct from here to, we had an agent in Philadelphia. And then to Russia, first shipment was 1803, and to China, 1858. And we got copies of all these letters.
They're really cool.
So just a quick catch up on what we saw in the vineyards yesterday. So this is the Cognac area, 465 kilometers southwest of Paris, 120 km north of Bordeaux. Cognac received its appellation d'origine contrôlée in 1st of May 1909. And this map was ratified in 1938, but based on an archaeological study which was done as far back as 1853. And basically, it says there are 6 growing areas divided by soil type. So, border is a lot of clay, flint in the soil, Grand Champagne, chalk and limestone, Petit Champagne, limestone, a little bit of chalk, Fambois, chalk, limestone, clay, but a little bit of sand in the soil. Bombois, quite a little bit of sand in the soil. Sand in the soil means the eau de vie is going to age fairly quickly. And then finally you have Bois Ordinaire. This is affected by the sea breezes, so it has what we call a maritime effect. And the salt, when you distill it with the grape juice or the wine, it gives the cognacs a very slight bitterness. So we don't use that area. For the new VSSD, we use Petit Champagne, Fambois and Bombois. And then for Cordon Bleu, XO, 4 growth areas, and for L'Eau de Jean Martell that we had last night, it's 10% Borderies and 90% Grand Champagne. So we have this is where the chateau is in Borderies and Domaine de Gallienne that we visited yesterday. Our other distillery is here, where our bottling plant is, and we have warehouses in this little city as well. So we're going to take a walk in the vineyards again, but this time this is a year in the life of the vineyard. It's a cycle. So what would normally take as a year to see, we're going to do it in 5 minutes. So we start, imagine here, we're in January. So January, the vines are sleeping, we're busy distilling. And you have to wait till the end of February, beginning of March, when we prune the vines. Nowadays we leave, this is called a cane. We leave 2 canes on, but they're trained much higher up in an arc. And the idea being to spread the weight of the bunches more evenly across the trellis work. So pruning takes place from end of February through to end of March. And then April, budding starts. We saw yesterday it's just started because the vines are a little late this year vis-a-vis last year because of the bad weather. And this is the time, April, end of April, beginning of May, when we don't want frost and we don't want hail. and last year we had both. What happens is the frost will freeze the buds, and they will become stunted. Some people tried to spray the vines with water in the hope of making a cocoon round the buds, but unfortunately it was too late. Other people had helicopters to fly over the vines in the hope they could stir the cold air up, but too late. And then hail hit 10 days after, and that actually impacts on the wood, and it knocked a lot of the small berries off the stalks. So this area, the local farmers are very pessimistic. They said, oh, catastrophe, we've lost at least 40% of the crop. But in fact, when harvest time came, the surviving bunches were so big and so healthy that we managed to come from -40 up to -25. But there's no impact on like allocations or whatever as far as we're concerned. In this area, if you have a bumper year, you can put some of your new eau de vie to one side for a rainy day, and it's held in a stainless steel tank, and it's sealed by the excise department, so the eau de vie is not going to move, it's not going to change, not going to lose anything. And the idea is that if you do have a bad year and you want to boost up your intake, the money you make to a decent level, then you can go into that reserve and use some of it to make up for what you couldn't distill because you didn't have the wine. So that's had to be done by a lot of people 2 years running. So this climatic reserve, as it's called, is running quite low. So we're hoping, fingers crossed, this year we'll get not only a bumper harvest, but the quality will be good as well. And that will enable people to build up their reserve again. So here we are in May, and then June, and then July, where the berries are starting to grow quite big. But I talked about the soil types a few moments ago. So Fambois is the biggest growing area, and you can see here the difference in the soil types. This is quite orange or yellow, and that shows perfectly the sand effect. And the eau de vie from this area, they're always very fruity, but they age fairly quickly. And that's why we like to use them with Bornbois for the new VSSD. You don't need to age them very long before they open out. As a rough rule of thumb, Fambois, you can age them maximum 20-25 years. And that is really, there's obviously exceptions, but that's really is the maximum time you can age them. Someone's left a bag. We're going out that way. I thought it might explode. We have to bring in the bomb squad. Petit Champagne, very crumbly soil, limestone, some small pieces of chalk, aging potential 40 to 50 years in barrels. And the limestone and the chalk give the soil, the eventual eau de vie rather, a very light, fruity, very delicate in style. And then you have Borderies, where we were yesterday. The soil type much heavier, a lot of clay in there, and these big pieces of flint. And the eau de vie from there, aging potential 30 to 40 years, and very round, very mellow style of eau de vie. And then finally, Grand Champagne, big pieces of chalk, lots of limestone, aging potential 60, 65 years, 70 years in barrels. And when they're old, they're very fruity, and they develop these nice dry fruit smells and taste, like we found in the XO and in Loire, this nuttiness. So here we are, July, August. We like a lot of sunshine in July and August to make the grapes grow. Beginning of September, a little bit of rain, so that the humidity is absorbed by the vines, and that will swell the grapes out. And then normally It's been normal for the last 20 to 25 years. Harvesting takes place in middle of September to middle of October. Everything picked by machines. These vines are quite low down, but now we train them much higher on the trellis work to facilitate machine picking. And as I said yesterday, machines very efficient. They pick around 99.99% of the grapes. Basically, they just shake them off the stalk.
Are they slow moving?
Sorry?
Snow?
False.
No, I didn't,
They're plastic.
is that common?
It's a
in
a
the vineyards?
special type of. There are two types of snails in France. You have the Burgundy snails, which is the one we eat normally when you have escargot in a restaurant, and then you get these monsters, which are called cagouilles in this area, and they grow big because they feed on the vine leaves.
Not detrimental?
No. They feed on the vine leaves, and a lot of people will go in the vineyards, especially when it's humid, and they'll take them off the vine plants, and then you starve them for a week, and you make them eat flour, which will purge their system, and then you can cook them.
Huh.
So here we are, September, October, the harvest has taken place. November, the leaves, everything starts dying, the vines are going to start hibernating, and then here we are, December. We're too busy distilling, so we don't need to take care of the vines, and then we go back to January, and it all starts again.
How harsh are the winters?
Not very harsh. Generally, we get a cold spell either end of January or beginning of February, when the temperature goes down to, say, -5, -6, occasionally -10, but it's only for a period of about a week or 8 days maybe. And so it doesn't actually freeze the sap in the vines,
Right.
because it's quite a brief period. And we don't get a lot of snow here. It snows every 5 years.
Okay.
And everyone runs around panicking for a day, and because we're not equipped. And then in summer we get 36, 37 Celsius, very dry, not humid, and so that's why the vines grow very well in this area, and especially with the chalky soil, that reflects the heat onto the bottom of the bunches.
What is one of the grapes at full maturity if you just ate it off the vine?
You'd find it incredibly bitter. And, if you ate a lot of them, you'd probably develop, shall we say, the runs. Yeah, it's not a good drinking wine. You can buy it in its raw state on market days in the different villages. And basically they put a litre bottle, they put plastic corks in, and because the wine's still fermenting, it blows the corks off. You're walking around the market and suddenly you hear as a cork flies off. And it looks like mud, but because it's not vinified, it's just raw wine, and it's not very good. It's very, very bitter.
And these are all the varieties, even the Grand Champagne that they would.
Oh yeah, all Uni Blanc. It's all Uni Blanc. It's very difficult to do a subjective tasting of the wine in its raw stage. That's why we do a micro distillation to check. When a partner sends us wine, we take a sample at his place. It's micro distilled, and it's not to check on the future quality. It's only to check to make sure the wine is clean. Then we give it the okay. Wine tanker goes. It picks up the wine, takes another 3 litre sample, and the second 3 litre sample, micro distillation compared with the first one, and then if it's okay, we accept the wine into our storage tanks, those big fiberglass things we saw yesterday, and then eventually it's distilled. But we have a whole fleet of wine tankers which just go all round the partners. It's quite a lot. There's 1,200 of them. And the idea is we start distilling last week in October, and normally, in a normal year, we'd go on until about the last week in March. This year we actually stopped in end of February because we didn't have enough wine to distill. Okay. There's a little mushroom which feeds on the evaporation, and it doesn't do any harm. It's called Terroir cognacensis, its Latin name. It just exists, and wherever there is evaporating eau de vie or cognac, you'll find this mushroom. You can't escape from it. And what the excise department did after the Second World War, when colour photography became affordable, they took aerial photos of the various villages and towns, and then they went knocking on doors. Excuse me, do you pay your taxes? You've got cognac. Oh, me? Never. Black roof. Damn.
Wow.
Dead giveaway. And it's so virulent, it'll grow on your car if you don't wash it every month.
Really? Wow.
And then you have to get the karcher out. But it doesn't do any damage, and there is a treatment you can put on buildings now. You spray them, which will deter it, but it's not 100% efficient. But anyway, it's part of the folklore of this area. Distillery at Gallienne. This is a replica of a distillery around 1920, 1930. And but when we make the wine, you remember after the alcoholic fermentation, the yeast dies. Imagine this is a big wine tank, and it falls down to the bottom of the tank, and we rack off all the clear wine. And this is what we distill. People such as Remy Martin, they have propellers inside their wine tanks, which just prior to distillation, it stirs everything up, and this is what they distill. And that's why, you remember when we did the tasting, their style of eau de vie is quite heavy, and when you add water, it goes cloudy. That's a byproduct of distilling the lees. But in a still like this, you would do both distillations. And the still like this would have been powered by coal or wood. And the only difference between the stills today and this still is this device in the center. When you put cold wine into a hot boiler, you risk burning the first few litres. So to get round that issue, because it does give a nasty smell and a nasty taste to the future eau de vie, to get round that, they would pass the vapours through this wine warmer and then into the condensing worm. So the idea being that the vapours would pre-warm, would preheat the wine, and then you wouldn't have that problem of the wine wouldn't be cold anymore, so it wouldn't burn when it went into the hot still. Nowadays, we don't need that part of the still in the equation, because we have a huge pipe. It's 5 meters long. When we pump it's full of electric elements, like electric water heater. When the wine comes from the warehouse, it passes through this pipe, and it's preheated by the electric elements. But of course, in the 20s and the 30s, they didn't have that sort of technology available. So that's why these wine warmers were developed. Again, everything's made out of copper. The reason it's red, by the way, is because when stills were originally made, when they were hammering away at it, they used to use a mixture of bull's blood and copper paste to make the copper slightly more malleable. And what's happened is that traditionally there's a coat of red paint now on the stills, So, exactly the same process. First distillation, we make the bouillie. Second distillation, we make the heads, the heart, the seconds. We separate off the heads and the seconds. We keep the heart, and the heart goes into the barrels for the aging process. And even though everything at our distillery is computerized, there's one thing a computer cannot do, and that is smell or taste. So that's why we still need a lot of experienced distillers, because the cut between the heart and the seconds is the most crucial part of the second distillation. And if what the distiller thinks is still good coming out of the still, he can override the computer until the quality changes, which may be after 5 minutes or after 10 minutes. So once we have the eau de vie, it's colourless. We need to give it some colour, we need to give it some tannins, we need to give it some woody flavours, vanilla and so on. And we do that by the aging process. So we go next door into the... So, you remember last night when we walked into the warehouse, we were sort of hit by the angel share. There is angel share here, but it's a lot less, it's a lot more muted. And this is because this is what we call a humid warehouse. In the old days, warehouses had earthen floors like this one, so you had a natural humidity coming up. And warehouses were always built near water, either a river or a pond, wherever it was humid, at the bottom of the valley, but never on the top of the valley where it gets warm. And the idea is that the traditional warehouse is both cold or cool and humid. Modern warehouses are cool, but they're dry. And that's why we're experimenting at the moment in some of our warehouses. We have a sprinkler system, so why not use it so it emits a very fine spray, a mist, and that will cool the top of the warehouses. Because in a warehouse which has 8 layers of racking, layers 1 and 2 will develop slower than layers 7 and 8. So you have to change your barrels over at some point. And so we're trying to avoid that, because that's when you move a barrel, that's when you break it. So by using the sprinkler system, we're cooling down the top of the warehouses, and for the moment it's an experiment, but it looks like it's working. So when you put the eau de vie into a barrel, there are basically 3 things that happen. First is evaporation. Oak is a very hard wood, but the volatile alcohol vapors and the liquid content of the barrels can escape through the fibers. We lose around 2.5% of our total stock every year in evaporation. It's an auditor's nightmare. But it's a very vital part of the cognac making process. And at the same time there's this evaporation, the angel share, air can go into the barrels. And the bioxidation, that causes the third process, which is extraction. The tannin content of the wood is extracted, it goes into the liquid. So is the nice woody flavours, nice flavours of vanilla, and so that's how you get the woodiness, the tannins, the vanilla flavour in your cognacs. And we buy around 2,500 new barrels every year, but we always repair our old barrels because we're having to lay stock down for longer periods of time, and you can't really keep a young eau de vie in a new barrel for more than 2 years, otherwise it would get too much colour too quickly. For example, we've got some barrels here, the youngest, these are called Tiersons, they hold 520, 530 litres. The youngest one we have was built in 1927. We know that because that's when we stopped building this type of barrel. So let's say we take this barrel, we put some brand new eau de vie in it, and then we buy a new barrel from a cooperage, and we put the same eau de vie in that barrel. Then, I'm a very clever person, I invent a time machine, and we go forward 60 years to taste from both those barrels. The eau de vie that was in what was the new barrel will probably be black in colour, totally woody, tannic, you couldn't use it. But the eau de vie that was in the older barrel should be a nice golden amber colour, the correct amount of woodiness, tannins, vanilla and so on. It should be perfect fit for drinking. So we classify our barrels as 3 types. We have new, which are used for the first time, used, which have been used one time, and then old barrels, which have been used 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times.
Does the angel share vary in new versus older barrels?
No, it varies from warehouse to warehouse depending on the aging qualities of the warehouse.
I think you did mention yesterday, as you age cognac longer, the angel share percentage lowers each year?
Yeah, cognac when it's, or eau de vie when it's young, because it's stronger in alcohol, there'll be more evaporation. It loses about 1.5 proof every year, but it'll lose more when it's younger and stronger than when it's older and less strong. So it's a rule of thumb, it's an average. But every year, in terms of physical liquid loss, that is 2.5% on average for us. And we're lucky because in this area, you can claim for that for excise relief on your evaporation, because it's a phenomenon that you can't stop. Okay.
'61, '62.
So when the cellar master and his team decide they need to make a blend of, we'll take an example, Cordon Bleu, they will do the blend again in miniature, and when they have the taste exactly right, they can calculate how much different eau de vies they need to fill up a big stainless steel camembert. And because when we blend Cordon Bleu, we're talking about doing a 150,000 litres at one time. So for Cordon Bleu, the blend is normally around 200 different eau de vie mixed together. At the same time, they will add some osmosed water to cut down the alcoholic strength, bring it down to just above 80 proof. And then the Cordon Bleu will be put into big vats for what we call the temps de calage, the resting period. And once they're sure that the blend is okay, which could be after 8 or 10 months for Cordon Bleu, then they authorize the bottling. Prior to the bottling, we chill filter the cognac, and then it's after the filtering has been done, it's reheated to 20 Celsius, which is the ambient temperature in the bottling plant. For something like L'Or de Jean Martell, you remember we had that last night? There's around 700 different eau de vie used. So if you imagine one drop from all these sample bottles, there are 710 of them, going in here, that's how complex L'Or de Jean Martell is. But in fact, they don't just take 700 lots of eau de vie, they'll do pre-blends. Imagine a pyramid upside down. At the top, you've got pre-blends, pre-blends, pre-blends. You know what sort of profile of spirit you want to go into your L'Or de Jean Martell. So you mix these pre-blends, and as you come down, you're mixing more and more. And then right at the bottom, you've got your final 2 pre-blends, and you just add a little bit of this, a little bit of that to get the taste and the smell as it should be. And then the resting period for L'Or is between 12 and 18 months. And we only blend about 1,000 litres at a time. Now, if the tasting team decides, well, no, we're not going to use this eau de vie, it's excellent, we're going to keep it, they'll decide after maybe when it's about 60, 65 years, they're going to take it out of the barrels and they put it in these big glass bottles called demijohns. And a demijohn is either 56 litres, 32 or 22 litres.
You still use that kind of?
Oh yeah, they're full.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, and you can just see on the top, there's a huge cork and it's red wax around it. And that way there's no air there's no transfer of evaporation and air coming in. So the eau de vie in there will be as fresh as the day they were put in there. And it's the same for cognac. When you put it into a bottle, it's not going to move anymore, not like a wine. You know, we get people bringing this up and writing to saying, oh, my grandfather bought a bottle of filled with VSOP, and it took 40 years ago. It's really extra quality now. Sorry. As long as it's been stored correctly. So these, there's an interesting story about these little bottles. They're called in French montre. And the workmen in the warehouses in the 1800s and the 1900s used to put a cord around the neck of the bottle, lower it into a barrel, and take a sample. And they wanted to show the sample to the cellar master. And the French verb to show is montre. So these became known as montre. And these are blown by mouth. So that's why the punt, there's never the same size. Because they're blown by hand, by mouth. Nowadays, of course, we still use them, but they're done on a machine. You see the notch there. These bigger ones are called rouleaux. They're for rolling, like a rolling pin when you're rolling pastry. And no one has the right to, no one has the copyright on this bottle. Any cognac company can use it.
It is almost reminiscent of the VSSD look, though.
Well, yeah,
Visually.
artistic license. No, but
That's
we
iconic, though. I mean,
yeah, but we based it on the VSSD, and even Blue Swift is based on that bottle, the rouleau. Just we compacted it to martellize it, if you like.
It's called true multitasking right here.
just glossed over this. Looks the most old here, and this was old in the 70s and 80s.
Oh. And we equipped it with new tools. So all these old ones were put on the visitors circuit for people to see.
Cool.
This is how they made barrels in the old days, up until around 1960s, 1970s.
How did they get the bend, like the shape?
You stand the staves, it's
Right.
called in a rose shape, in a circle. You drive metal hoops down, and then you build a fire on the inside. You spray water around the center of the outside. The fire on the inside will draw the humidity through the staves
And make it
in the middle
malleable.
and make it slightly
Wow.
bendable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you have to use a cable and a winch, otherwise you would crack the staves.
Right.
And you'll see there's a couple that have been cracked there.
Ah, cool.
But this is the part of the oak tree that we use. Out of a lump like this, you get maybe 2.5 barrels. That's all. But the cooperage that we use, who bought the Martell cooperage and our coopers, they have each time they have a tree cut down, one is replanted. So there's automatic reforestation, and the wood is they're also stave millers. In other words, they're the people who supply staves to the coopers. So the wood comes to the cooperage, it's stored outside like this, in the open air, and it's washed by the rain, dried by the sun for 2 years. And that is to bring the humidity level in the oak down to a reasonable level. And once that's done, they then take the plank inside, and what used to be done by hand is now done by machine. You cut the ends off, Then you scoop out the inside, you round the outside up, and you make a sort of elongated lozenge shape. The next stage is to stand the staves in a circle, drive rings down them, and then you need to bring in the splayed out ends. And what they do is they make a fire on the inside of what will be the barrel. They put a cable, a winch, and they put water on the center of the staves on the outside. And that water is humidity, so it will be drawn inwards by the fire, and that will make the staves supple enough using the hawser and the winch to bring to make the barrel shape. It's then flipped on its side and more rings are put on. Once that's done, you then need to put the ends in. So they make a circle, they pin planks of oak together, and they put reeds between them because there's not so much pressure to make the wood butt up against its neighbours on the ends. So that's why the reeds act as a sort of gasket. They then chamfer down the edge of the staves at both ends and cut a groove about that far down, about 2-3 centimetres from the end of the stage. And that is, they're then going to slot the lid into that groove. Once that's done, the barrel's basically finished. They need to test it. And so they fill it full of, they put 10 litres of boiling water in it. And then they put compressed air. They put it under pressure. And that, if there's a leak, then the water will be forced out by the compressed air. 30% of all barrels leak first time. So they go back to the coopers, they're repaired, and so on. But at every stage of making the barrels, it's the human eyes and ears that watch, observe, and are looking for knots that might not be picked up, or veins in the wood, because those mean leaks. So we buy around 2,500 barrels every year. The standard barrels they used to be 270, then 520, but now we're using 350 and 400 barrels, simply because they provide the best ratio of wood to liquid. In Bordeaux it's 225 litre barrels because they want a lot of tannin versus the liquid. In the white wine areas they use 600 litre barrels because they don't want a lot of tannins, a lot of woody flavours in the wine. So the ratio is much smaller. So we've got 2 more places to go, which we don't take tourists to, and then we'll head back and have some lunch. But we need to have a drink of something first. That's the carrot. This used to be a mock. This is a graving of our old blending hall, and the barrels used to come up to the floor above these vats. They'd be upended. The vats would be filled, and then we had huge silk filters, very fine silk filters. The cognac would pass by gravity from these vats into this vat, and then back into barrels for the resting period. Nowadays, of course, we still use gravity, but it's all done in stainless steel, because you're not actually aging at that stage. We don't bring tourists to this part of Martell, because this is reserved for VVIPs and you have to earn the right to come here. And I think you have done, so that's why we're going here.
That is awesome. Perfect.
So you see the guy in the photo. That's Maurice Martell, who was responsible for knocking down the Chateau de Chanteloup in 1931 and then rebuilding it in the Normandy style that it is today. And whenever he left the bureau, he always had his hat on. And only took his hat off on 2 occasions. One was to say hello to a young lady, and the second occasion was when he went through a door on the left as a mark of respect to the eau de vie in his special cellar, because he remembered different times in his family's life, in his ancestors' lives, by the dates on the barrels and on the demijohns. So that's a photo of him going through a door on the left, which we're not going to go through just yet, because I've got something else I want to show you first. And the window that's illuminating him is now hidden behind the photograph.
where I want to drink from now.
There's no step here.
Okay.
It's a little muddy because unfortunately we got infiltration when it rains. It sweats a little in winter. So, the reason I wanted to bring you in here, most of France's forests are controlled by an outfit called the Office National des Forêts. And in 2011, they rang Martell up and said, oh, we've got this tree in the Tronçais forest where you get your fine grain oak from. Do you want to buy it? So we sort of said, well, another fine grain oak tree, why not? They said, oh, but we forgot to tell you, that tree was planted in 1715. And it took 8 people with arms outstretched to go round it. And the wood was sent to, the tree was ill, it had to be cut down anyway. So we said, yeah, we want that wood. 1715, Jean Martell. So it went to the cooperage. The wood was stored outside for 2 years, and in 2013, they made these 24 barrels here. And we put, in 2014, we put a young eau de vie in there to sort of rinse them out, to get rid of some of the excess tannins and so on. And then all our special editions for our 300th birthday, 2015, were finished in these casks. There was a special edition of Cordon Bleu. There was the Premier Voyage you see in the at Chanteloup and in the bottle at the bottom there, and a special edition of XO, all finished in these barrels. Obviously, we're still using them. I don't know what's in here at the moment, but I'm told it's going to be used in a future special presentation, limited edition, coming out, I believe, in 2021. Wow. So, funnily enough, we used to call this warehouse Purgatory, because when you die, if you get sent to Purgatory, you're guaranteed a place in paradise. Well, we don't have a paradise cellar because Hennessy have the option on that name. But we have a Chez Jean Martell, and that's where we're going to go now, because you've been to Purgatory, and now we're going to go to paradise.
Do a quick picture of that?
Yeah, we're going to do this up. So this is Jean Martell's warehouse.
Ooh, nice
This
smell.
is where we keep the good stuff.
The good stuff.
And eventually, most of all these barrels, if they're not used for something like law, they will end up in demijohns. They're just in the process of the aging. The aging process is just being finished off.
This is where you keep the good stuff, huh?
This is where we do.
This
So
is
if
the
you had
cellar.
beef, you could taste this at barrel proof?
No, we can't. We can taste this one at barrel proof. So, what we have for you here is an eau de vie. It's not a cognac. It's never been blended, and it's come straight out of the demijohn this morning. It was distilled in 1848. Wow. So, what you need to do is take a glass whilst I speak and hold it just to warm it up slightly, because it's a little chilly in here. So, this was in barrels for 65 years, and it comes from the area today that we call Grand Champagne. So the oldest eau de vie we have in here was distilled in 1802. We have 4 places similar to this, because you don't want to keep all your stock in, all your eggs in the same basket, just in case. So we've got anything, for example, let's say 1880, 1885, would be Folle Blanche or Colombin, and anything post that date would be Uni Blanc. So this is a good chance what you're going to taste now was distilled from Folle Blanche or Colombin grapes, 1848.
When did phylloxera happen?
1878.
Okay. So this is all pre-phylloxera. What we're having?
1848.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So we've also got stock from the Second World War. Production took place, mostly done by the women and children, and also during the First World War. So, this is an exceptional eau de vie, otherwise it wouldn't be in here. It may be a little cloudy, but that's acceptable simply because it's come out of the demijohn this morning, and it's not filtered. So, if you do the first nose, even if it's still a little chilly, you've got this enormous notes of citrus fruit. And then the second nose, you've still got the fruitiness, blackcurrant, but also quite a lot of wood. There's a woodiness, almost nuttiness there, hazelnuts, walnuts, these sort of dried fruit. In the mouth, just like L'Or de Jean Martell yesterday, starts off slowly, then suddenly expands. A lot of tannin, very smooth, very woody, and then exceptionally you'll find out a really long finish. So what was your family doing in 1848?
1848. Still then, but
Yeah.
age 65 years.
65 years in barrels, yeah.
Where will this product end up? Is
Here.
it just going to stay here?
We use some of it in L'Or. The oldest part of the blend in L'Or was distilled in 1871, so pre-phylloxera. But we do occasional bottlings from here for celebrities, you know, I think something that will bring us a little bit of publicity. But most of the time, this is part of Martell's hidden, this is our heritage, it's our treasure, so we don't use it.
It's a personal.
Yeah, I mean, it's we've worked it out. We have the capacity. If, for example, if suddenly L'Or de Jean Martell sales skyrocketed, we have a capacity to do 2,000 9-litre cases for at least 40 years. That's how much old stock we have. We got probably the biggest stock of old eau de vie in the whole of the area.
Oh, really?
More than Remy. They do a lot of Louis XIII, but our tasters have noticed the quality is getting younger. They're putting younger and younger eau de vie in because they don't have as much 100-year-old eau de vie as we do. But we don't want to sell 2,000 cases of L'Or. You know, let's keep it exclusive, top end of the range. But you know, we have the capacity if that should ever come to fruit. And of course, in 30, 40 years' time, there'll be other eau de vies finishing their aging. So we bought a company which specialized in these demijohns, and that was simply to boost up our stocks of old eau de vie.